Welcome to Mana TV. Warm greetings and greetings to all Indian diaspora, Indian Republic Day celebrations worldwide. All Indian NRIs are celebrating Indian Republic Day. We are in the 75 years of the Diamond Jubilee celebrations, our independence, as well as formation of Constitution. Today, Mana TV is coming with the greatest occasion. We are encashing and we have invited very stalwarts. Really, they are iconic personalities of the Indian originity. I welcome Rahul Sur sir. Is a retired IPS officer and worked as a chief for the United Nations peacekeeping evaluations, as well as is a Maharashtra cadre IPS officer and he served as a IGP, as well as now he is serving as a executive director, HAHR, Hindu Advanced Human Rights in America and worldwide. They are working on the different violations. Where there is a violation, there is a suppression against the Hindu. We'll find the name of the Rahul sir. Rahul sir, welcome to Mana TV.
Namaste.
Yes.
Namaste.
As
Thank
well
you
as
very
we
much.
having one fantastic guest, Ajay Shah.
Namaste.
He is a founder of the Hindu Pact and President World Hindu Council of America and Hindu Vishwa, and as well as contextual and very controversial book author, Our Kashmir. Ajay Shah, welcome to Mana TV. As
Thank
well
you.
as we having our beloved friend, Mr. Krishna, also he will participate a little bit later on. We'll start with Ajay Shah. Ajay Shah ji, what is your message for the universe on the occasion of the 75 years of the celebration, Indian Constitution, as well as independence?
No, it's a excuse me. First of all, thank you very much for inviting us. We really appreciate. I really appreciate it. I think you're doing such a fantastic job, and it's a privilege to be part of your show here. I think that the way I look at it is that Bharat is Vishwaguru.
Yes.
It's not about the Bharat's constitution today, but through the ages, the message that Bharat has delivered, and it's not just the Bharat as a geographical entity, but if you think of Bharat as a spiritual entity, as a cultural entity, then you can start understanding why the Republic Day is important. We did not discover the new republic today and 75 years ago. If you look at the history of Bharat, even as far back as in the Vedas, there is a mention of Ganapadas, Mahaganpadas. These are all democratic institutions. They existed even 5,000 years ago, 7,000, 8,000 years ago. The democratic institutions in India existed. And so what we are saying now to the world is that we have had this democratic tradition. We have had this tradition of openness. We have had this tradition of inviting everyone's opinion. Let good thoughts come from all directions, say Upanishads. So inviting thoughts from all directions. Have everyone's participation in decision making. And be fair, be equal to everyone. These are some of the cultural, spiritual underpinnings of Bharat. Now, in past 1,000 years, we went through brutal oppression and occupation and all of that, and we are now back. Bharat is now emerged out of this, but the essential elements of democracy, of republican, existed way far back, and now we have the opportunity to share that with the rest of the world.
Yes, Rahul sir, I welcome you for the welcome remarks and how you respond on the 75 years of the Indian Constitution and Independence India. What is your expectation, whether we reached the expectation or not? If not, why?
So, first of all, again, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm really happy. And I think that to answer this question, whether we've reached our expectations and why not, I think I'll probably like to expand a little bit of Ajayji's, very good remarks, and that is, there was a book called "The Success of India's Democracy."
Yeah.
And this was written by a professor, Atul Kohli, in which they said that the success of India's democracy has been a success. But according to the author, the success was a result of the careful balancing of the interests of the center and the states and between the haves and the have-nots, right? So he said, well, it has been a success. But of course, when I finished reading the book, I asked myself, is that really the only reason for the success? And I said, no, it is not, because essentially it is based upon the values, the civilizational values of diversity of thought, of tolerance, of debate. These are the real things which have, made India into a democracy, and how it has taken such deep roots within. Now, it was unfortunate that this learned author did not ask the real reason why Indian democracy has succeeded. And that is where we are today. Now, in terms of these values, the tolerance, inclusiveness, that means that despite incredible diversity, we are a proud nation. And
Yes.
the kind of diversity which we have in India is unthinkable even in Europe, or even in China, or in the United States. So the I would say the credit for that is not sufficiently given. But now the question which you've asked is, why have we not achieved, and how do we look in the future? I think that is a very, very important question, and there are many aspects to that, which we will have to debate. That is not only the provisions of the constitution, but also the people who are going to be leading it, because the success of a country is dependent not only on what is written in its constitution, but also on the quality of its leaders and the quality of its people. So, since India is a majority Hindu country, I have great faith in its wisdom going forward, but certainly very, very formidable obstacles remain.
Yes. Ajay, really, our constitution is a very beautiful. It's covered each and everything, and even it's a focused on the minor things also. But lot of the politicians, a lot of the political parties misinterpreting the values of the constitution. What is your suggestion in that?
So with any and that that is a,
For example, fundamental rights. Fundamental rights is the kind for the protection of the each and every citizen rights. But some so-called secular outfits, it's diverting in a different way. They are molding in a different way. Then how you respond on it?
I think what has happened is that after the independence, the Indian education system, and right after the formation of parliament and all that, as the framers of the constitution had envisioned a constitution of a certain kind, and as they started fading away from the scene, people who were trained at, and I would just name it, people who were trained at JNU type of philosophy, they started taking over, and they started
Tupide gang.
diverting the dialogue in such a way that was detrimental to the majority community in India. So, for example, the freedom of religion was supposed to be all encompassing, as it emanated out of our principle of ekam satavipra bahuda vadanti, or sarva dharma sambhav. It originated from that. But and our framers wanted to really safeguard the interest of the minorities so that they don't get overrun by the majority. Noble thoughts. But once it went into the hands of politicians who did not have the historic context and did not respect the Indian history or civilization or the culture, they started twisting this constitution to suit their own needs. So, for example, they came up with, they decided they would leave they would still leave in place the management of temples in the hands of the government. Or they
Yes.
came up with the other ideas that a minority community is able to manage their own educational institute to the but not the majority. Now there was some provision of that for that in the constitution, but now it was taken to the extreme in such a way that the majority got stifled all the way, and the minorities. In fact, Manmohan Singh ji, who was the Prime Minister of India, actually came out and made a statement which completely against the spirit of the Constitution. And such a remarkable person like him made a statement that minorities will have the first right to all the resources of the country. Now that is something that when you put something like that in the play, obviously you see that the Constitution is no longer honored. Neither is Constitution nor the traditions that gave rise to the Constitution. They are now, that means that they have been now overrun by modern day political thought and the petty and narrow thinking of some people. That is the unfortunate part.
Yes, Rahul sir, you are the better person to speak on the fundamental rights. Why? Because your focus and your vision was the worldwide protection of the human rights as well as. How you respond about the Indian Constitution and fundamental rights?
Yeah, so again, developing on what Ajay has said, that it was envisaged in the constitution that we would do our utmost to protect, minority rights, and that's all for the good. But what has happened is that this has in fact turned into an instrument of deprivation for the majority, that is the Hindus. Now,
Yes.
if you have a look at, minorities have the right to manage their own religious institutions, the churches, their mosques, and that's fine. But at the
Rahul sir,
same,
you are going in a little bit out of frame. Kindly be in the frame, please. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, now, okay.
No, it's not okay. Just adjust your frame. Yeah, it's okay now.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
So in terms of the temples, if you have a look at it, it has been estimated that more than 1 lakh temples are under the control of the state governments. Now,
Yeah.
what are temples? Temples are not merely places of worship. They are, in fact, the focal point of civilizational continuance, renaissance, reflection, debate, upkeep of the priestly classes, artists. So therefore, it is a whole ecosystem by itself. Now, when they begin to be monopolized by the state, something very important and very distressing happens. And that is they land up in the hands of government bureaucrats. Now, I was a government bureaucrat, and I can tell you one thing: the government is in no position to run temples in the spirit in which temples ought to be run. And again, the deeper question is, why have we landed up in this position? And that is because of the enormous power and the enormous money which the temples generate. That, in fact, acts as a source of really of vested interest for the state. So that is why you find there is so much of resistance to the release of Hindu temples from state control. Now, this is a battle which we will have to undertake, and we will have to win this no matter how long it takes. Because if you have the rule of law in this country, and if minorities are allowed to run their own religious institutions, then obviously the same thing, must be given to the majority. So in that sense, it is a very, very vital thing. And I think in the next till 2047, this question is going to become increasingly important. That is, what is the attitude of the Indian constitution towards the majority? What is the attitude of the minority towards the majority? And it will take all our wisdom and flexibility and imagination to manage this carefully. Because I tend to say that we should not rule out, thinking about the worst, because that's how we can prepare for it. So, in the sense that this lack of equality between Hindus and other minorities is truly troubling. And that extends also to things like, for instance, the Uniform Civil Code. It extends to things like marriage. There is a vast gap between what the Indian government and the state prescribes for minorities and the majority.
Yes. Ajay Bhai, even Bharatiya Janata Party, NDA alliance, directly or indirectly in ruling in 22 or 23 states, even we are not able to see temples are free from the government clutches in that states also. What are the reasons
So,
for
I
that?
mean, again, taking off of what Rahul ji just said, right? Like
Yes.
the Constitution, there's Article 25 2A of the Indian Constitution that allows the state to make laws.
Religious freedom? Yes.
Right. To make
Yes.
laws regulate or restrict any economic, financial, political, secular activity that may be associated with religious practices. So this is the guys so the proponents of this, temple control, they argue that a temple's financial and administrative operations, like the management of donation, property, charity, public charity, they are secular. Okay, they don't say that for mosque, they don't say that for church, but they say for the Hindu temples, the money that is coming in is actually secular in nature. Now, what ends up happening is that the money comes in under that guise. They call the donation that we are doing from our astha, we are putting money in the mandir, and these the government actually from 1 lakh mandirs that Rahul ji just mentioned takes
Yes.
that money and then appropriates it for other purposes. It may even go to purpose you never wanted to support. This is your donation, it's not tax money. So now, but you will never meet a politician of any party anywhere in the world who does not like revenue coming in. because that is the source of the exercise of power for them. Once you have a lot of that magnitude of money coming in, you can do a lot of political things with it. You can put it in the district and you can gain advantage, voting advantage for the next election. You can run schemes that benefit your political party, things like that. So no political party, unfortunately, whether it's BJP or Congress or Aam Aadmi Party, doesn't matter which party, politicians like to get money that they can use to further their political cause. And it's really unfortunate that the temple money is being used in this manner. And I think that really, I don't think of myself as a political activist. I am a Hindu activist. I'm a
Yeah.
Hindu advocate, which means that I want all political parties to compete for the Hindu vote and tell all political parties should compete and say, we are going to make things right for Hindus. We are not asking for special privileges. We just want equal treatment, right? And if that doesn't happen, and at some point we can talk about it, then what will end up happening is what happened with the case with Ramakrishna Mission, which
Yeah.
with the word Ram and Krishna in the name, they went to the court and said, we are not Hindu. They now lost it in Supreme Court, and we can talk about it in more detail. But this is a short, answer to your current question.
Yes, Rahul sir. Another beautiful feature is the separation of powers. Indian Constitution giving the lot of features, and it's a separation of powers of the execution, judiciary, and legislatory system. How you comment on the separation of powers?
So the separation of powers, well, the executive and the legislature in the parliamentary system is supposed to be one, right?
Yes.
The real distinction comes between the judiciary and the executive and the parliament. Now, what we have seen for a variety of reasons is you can look at it two ways. One is that the judiciary is becoming more powerful and more activist in response to the shortcomings of the executive. That's one alternative. The second alternative is to look at it and say, well, they are getting more active and they are occupying a place where they should not be occupying, and they are becoming quasi-administrative, quasi-legislative bodies. And
Yes.
I think there is truth in both of them, but at the same time there is also another aspect, that is the judiciary doing something which the executive does not want to do, and the executive is using the judiciary to take unpopular decisions and pass it on with them. So all these elements are there, but certainly I think the judiciary has been occupying more and more the place of the executive, including administering, giving orders for the future. Essentially, a judicial function is a retrospective function. That is, it is supposed to decide on things which have already happened, right? And we have now the situation where the Supreme Court, everything goes to the Supreme Court, which means that in an implied manner, the high courts and the lower courts are less effective, and therefore the public have less trust in them. So this really needs to be corrected. And in terms of the judicial appointment, that certainly needs to be corrected, because now it has become a self-appointing, kind of system in the Supreme Court. And there needs to be far more transparency in terms of, how the judges are appointed, why they are appointed, what is their background, and the separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary. That is becoming really a problem in India, and especially when certain political decisions are made. And I think that a lot of serious thinking will have to be put in by the Indian political, intellectual establishment and Hindu thinkers to correct it, so that at least the Hindu ethos out there is not automatically received in the courts with some kind of disdain or some kind of feeling that this is for Hindu supremacy, whereas all it is a cry for the genuine and legitimate recognition of the spiritual aspirations of the Hindu people.
Yes. Ajay bhai, really, some places in India, executive is totally under control of the political system. There is no developmental aspect of the how they prescribed as per the provisions of the constitution. How you respond on this?
So that's it's very interesting, because the way the Indian system over the last a couple of hundred years has evolved. I think you can think of it as the vestiges of the colonial rule by the British. So when
Yes.
British ruled India, they wanted to make sure that the administrative services that India has remained under the tight control of the colonial power. And I think when India became independent, again, you have to think of it from a political perspective and a politician's perspective. We should have divested from that kind of colonial system, colonial roots a long time ago. But when you replace the colonial masters with the Indian politicians who want to be like colonial masters with brown skin, that's what ended up happening for good part of 70 years in India. They came to power and they found it very useful to have this kind of administrative control through the through the existing administrative service mechanisms. And that system is still we still live in. I mean, I grew up in Mumbai, and we used to in Mumbai people used to say that the administrative folks in the in the government secretariats would say that to politicians that you come and go, but we are always here. But really it's the system that politicians kept in place, because the administrative they give administrators have a lot of power, but at the same time the politicians have the have a lot of ways of manipulating that by transfers and all the other means. So really it works to the advantage of both. So it's a very symbiotic relationship between the administrative service and the politicians, to the detriment of common people.
Yes, Rahulji, it's a beautiful feature. Another feature is a federal system. It's a copied from the different developed countries like America and some other countries. But in India, federal system is totally failed as per my statement. Why? Because when we are visiting the Kerala, when we are visiting the West Bengal, when we are visiting the some parts of the Tamil Nadu, it will create a lot of questions whether we are staying in India or not. Well, because a total federal system definition is changing in this two states. What is your opinion on this?
So, again, we have to look at it from the point of view of India's diversity. Because it is so diverse, again, going back to that book, The Success of Indian Democracy, they said one of the reasons is that it has been able to strike a balance between federalism and state governments. Now, the three lists of which are there, which is the central list, the state list, and the concurrent list.
Yes.
And we were talking about the temples. The temples fall under the state list. In other words, the federal government cannot, legislate on them. Now, what has happened is that there is a fair degree of decentralization in India, and the state governments have real power. And therefore, many times the writ of the state government, federal government, does not run out there. And that accounts for the fact that when you go to some of these places, you think whether you are in India or not. Now, if you go to West Bengal, the phenomenon of infiltration from Bangladesh has been going on for so many years. Now, what has been the state government doing about it? So the question arises is that, again, what is the correct balance between the federalism and the state government so that, the unity of India and the integrity of India is not disrupted? And that question is becoming an increasingly relevant one, given the fact what is happening in Bangladesh. So there are no easy answers to this, but at the same time, it will have to be recognized that there are limits to state power when the integrity of the country is considered.
Rahulji, try to be in the frame. You are again out of frame, please.
Now?
Yeah. It's okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's okay. Continue,
Yeah.
please.
So that's what I was saying, that in terms of, there are many state governments where sometimes, the programs which are run by the central government are not deliberately implemented because they do not want the credit to go to the central government. Now, the demography of several states has been changing, and that is something we will realize the implications of this more and more as the years go by. And they may not be that good. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, Ajayji. Recently, yesterday, one of the Congress senior leader commented about we have to welcome Bangladeshis to our nation, and we have to treat them as even if we face some problems also, adults also, we have to accept that. Which kind of democratic values?
That is so Sam Pitroda made that statement. He is the president of the Overseas Congress.
Sitting this side, I can't take his name. You can take his name. It's a
Yeah. it's amazing that in today's environment in America, you sit in America when you see what is happening in last 4 years. Over a million illegal immigrants came to America, and the current administration is now actively seeking at least the people who have committed crimes, and they've started deportation about 3 days ago. So the last thing a person sitting in America should be doing is giving lectures to India. Uh, Look at in India, infiltration from Bangladesh has been a long-standing problem. I remember in the early 80s, and Rahulji will even know even more than I do. But even in as far back as in late 70s, early 80s, there was in Assam there was a big mass movement against it. There were 2.5 million illegal immigrants in Assam in late 70s and early 80s. And at the same time, there were about 7.5 million illegal immigrants from Bangladesh in India. And you can look at, so now if you look at the demographic implications, you look at the implications in terms of economy, you look at the implications in terms of terrorism, in terms of crime. For someone sitting in Chicago to be making this statement when people in West Bengal are suffering daily as a result of this illegal immigration, where a lot of the areas in Assam and Bengal are no-go zones for Hindus because they have been completely taken over by illegal Bangladeshis. You hear about the kind of atrocities they're committing on the native population over there of Hindus, and you say that, oh, we should welcome them and share our wealth. A person who is Rohingya from Myanmar is being settled illegally in Jammu. Now, you have to only think about why that person is being settled in Delhi or Jammu, where they have no geographic connection, no linguistic connection, no connection of culture. Why do you think that person is being settled in Jammu? Is it because they
Yes.
want to change the demography of Jammu so that the next election comes with the fake Aadhaar cards and fake voter cards? These people are going to become voters, and they will then start a movement or even support a movement even in Jammu, which is happening in the Kashmir Valley, which is a separatist movement from India. So these are not just demographic changes; these are the changes to the national boundaries of India. Not to speak of crime and terrorism and the economic implications, all the Hindus that is happening in India. So for a person in Chicago to make this kind of statements, which are without knowing the ground reality, is very detrimental to people who live in India. And I hope that the people in India will respond to that.
Yes. Rahulji, internal security and external security is a 1,000 million question in India. We having 170 national border security spots as well as 100 coastal security spots. Every day we are facing a lot of some cause of ceasefire classification. Bro, what do you suggest for that?
Again, the border areas of the country, irrespective of the government, state government in control, should be under the control of the federal government. That is,
Yes.
you should be having a border, say 2 kilometers or whatever it is, which is adjacent to the external borders of the country, which are completely under the control of the federal government. That's one. Number two is that in terms of the illegal migration, and I may like to point out that recently, we have written a joint letter to the Prime Minister of India on Bangladesh, in which we have one of the things which we have suggested in that is strict action against corrupt officials who give Aadhaar cards. Because
Yeah.
how do you think that these millions of these people have come and seamlessly integrated into India? Let us be blunt about it. It is because there is connivance on the part of our officials. And we will have to respond to that. Now, in terms of the security, frankly, we are going to be facing more and more of an asymmetric threat in which, we are in the area of, drone warfare, AI, and in addition to all the conventional threats which exist, that is infiltration through physical means, people who are inside out here, who are traitors to the country. So one is very, very grateful to the current government that there have been no terrorist blasts in India for a long time. But there is really no, place or time or opportunity for even the slightest relaxation of vigilance in this. Now, in terms of the Congress calling for, welcoming Bangladeshis, frankly speaking, this is a very old and tired textbook. And that is, you invite people outside who you think are going to become your voters, and therefore they're going to, ensure power for you. It is the same trick of the left in America, in Europe, and that is in Germany, France, UK. It's exactly the same thing. Open the borders, let them come inside, they're going to be our voters. So we have to call it out, and the Indian people must be aware that this is highly dangerous. And the easiest way to think about it is to put yourself at the reception of a policy like this. If they say that we should welcome people from outside, the question to Mr. Petroda will be, are you willing to open your house to that? And here I would like to give an example of what happened recently. The border czar out here, he was lectured by the Pope that it's cruel to keep migrants out. And his response was, do you know that the Vatican has got high walls, and if you get into the Vatican, it is a serious crime? In other words, let us not be hypocritical and try to suggest policies for others which you yourself will never implement in your own life, or for your own personal living. So that's what it is. The Indian people need to be very vigilant in this, because this has long-term and increasing security implications.
Yes.
Just to add to what Rahulji just said, and that is,
Please, Ajay bhai, please.
I just want to say that the whole trend that Congress started this was as a result of a politician who later became president of India, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad. The entire immigration of Bangladeshis into Assam to change the demography of Assam was, and Sam Pitroda is just continuing what Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad started.
Yes. Ajay bhai, again, I don't know whether it's clearly written in the constitution and whether it's inserted. Lot of controversies and a lot of interpretations are there, particularly about secular state. How do you respond on this?
So the word secular in the Indian in the preamble of the Constitution was added as a 42nd Amendment in 1977. The word secular was not the word that our founders envisioned, because the word secular in Indian context does not make any sense. We are a very ancient civilization. A lot of our traditions, our culture, our practices are all based on our Sanskriti. And when we say, the word dharma to us means something very different than the word religion. And for the religions that are exclusionist, for them to come up with the word secular as a construct actually would make sense. For people who believe in dharma, for people who believe in ekam sata vipra bahuda vadanti, and
Yes.
for those people, you cannot apply the word secular the way it is being applied. And I think this whole thing was very political, and now it has taken on its own life.
Yeah. Rahulji, how you respond on the secular state?
So the secularism in this
You are out
country,
of frame again. Kindly be in frame, please. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
the
Yes.
secularism in India has actually come to mean a tolerance of some of the worst medieval practices in minority religions. That is essentially what has come. Now, let me just give you an example.
Please.
We had, polygamy in the Hindu society. And when Nehru was the prime minister, he got the Hindu Marriage Act, in which polygamy was abolished. At that time, there was resistance from the conservative Hindus that, we cannot abolish this, but in any case, it was abolished. And now it is obviously, well accepted, and there has been no resistance from the Hindu community. Now, this is a question of not of religion, but a question of the rights of women, right? And if we say that all Indian women are equal, that is, whether they are Hindu women or Muslim women, you will find the word secular has been used to deprive Muslim women of their rights.
Yes.
So consequently, what has happened is that the freedom of religion and secularism has come to include practices which are anathema to the spirit of the Indian Constitution. And therefore, obviously, it makes no sense at all in the Western concept, because if you say secularism means that we are not going to spend any money on any religion, that is clearly not the case. right? We've had the case of, Hajj subsidies for a long time. We've had, payments to imams, all that kind of thing. So that is really not the case. But what this word has come to mean, in a short sense, is the continuation of medieval traditions amongst minorities, which really have no place in any society which believes in the dignity of all human beings and the equal worth. They're even keeping aside Hinduism for a moment. Even if we say, well, we disregard all that and we just go over the Western concept, it does not make sense. Secularism, because of the word secularism, for instance, in France, they don't allow polygamy, even though it carries on, clandestinely, but it is illegal. So therefore, we really have to think of this word, and now it has become a political phrase. That is, if you remove this word, it means a majoritarian control, etc., etc. There needs to be really rethinking of this word. This word was deliberated upon and rejected in the debates of the Constituent Assembly.
Yes. Ajay bhai, since last several years, there is a slogan in the country, one vote, one nation, and one election. How far it is? Is it suggestible for India, which is having more than 3,500 languages and more than 270 cultures and states, different aspects? Is it possible?
Certainly possible. India is actually, as a democracy, India has shown that we can conduct election. India can conduct elections with 1 billion people participating in a very orderly and systematic way. Now, how it will actually work out in practice in terms of various states, having elections at different times and harmonizing all of that. There are some practical aspects to it, and then there are some other aspects, and that is, yeah, it takes you out of the always in election mode. Like, okay, now elections in one state got over, the election in second state is coming up, so politicians are always in a mode of campaigning all the time. And it actually gets them out of that mode and gives them chance to govern for a change. And so to that extent, it's positive. On the other hand, some people may argue that, look, it takes away the accountability piece of it. So for a year, if a government is not performing well, central government is not performing well, in state government, you have a chance to change it. So otherwise, you get kind of stuck for 5 years with a certain political party in both the places. So there are pros and cons, and I think it's for people in India to decide which is best for them. Sitting in America to give an advice on that kind of issue, yeah, I don't think would be received well by people in India.
Yeah, Rahulji, how you respond on that?
The thing is that there is certainly, if you have the state and the central
Sir,
government.
kindly frame is going out, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
So,
please.
if the central and the state elections take place at the same time, that is one thing. You can have, the central government, the central elections at one time and the state government elections, after 2.5 years, so that people don't get confused about it. But certainly there is an argument to be made for the fact that there is consistent governance, the fact that everybody is not in election mode all the time, and that it's like, it's like a lottery. Now we're going to have elections in, UP, then they're going to be in Gujarat, then they're going to be West Bengal, and all these random events popping up all the time, which the elections are not meant for elections. The elections are meant for a purpose, and that is that you're supposed to govern and you're supposed to take the country ahead. Now, if the timing of the elections itself becomes an issue in terms of ushering unpredictability in a country's political life, I'm frankly not for that. So the system, of course, it's for the Indians to decide. I am an Indian, actually, is that, there should be elections for the parliament, and then there should be elections for the state governments, separated by 2.5 years, so that the country has certainty about it. And just as we are certain about, when we have elections in the center, all the state governments should be aware that now is the time we are going to be judged by the people.
Yes. Ajay bhai, Government of India talking about nanotechnology and laser technology, Vande Bharat trains, bullet trains, a lot of advancements in the technologically. Another side, raising the poverty index and a lot of issues among the people, within the people. Then how to counter it?
I think this is a fallacy that everyone kind of falls into, that you cannot do one or the, you have to do only one or the other. There is such a thing as in America, there's a saying that you can actually walk and chew the gum at the same time. So look at it from this perspective. The money that is spent on technological advances have in past helped Indians come out of poverty, come out and betterment of everyone's life. If you look at India now, in last 15 years, 10 years, 12 years, India's poverty rate has the abject poverty. I'm not talking about, poverty has many categories. The abject
Yes.
poverty rate in India has come down to 14%. I remember when I was growing up, that rate was over 65%. So to bring the number of amount of people, and India's population since then has almost increased by 3 times. It was, it used to be about 500, 700 million people. Now it is 1.4 billion. So from 500 million to 1.4 billion, let's say, at least 2.5 times, 3 times the population has gone up. But the poverty rate has gone down. So a lot of people have been pulled from poverty. Now you may say that how this is people come out of poverty. We created different kinds of employment, whether it is in technology field where there's so many people employed in all the way from computer software development to manufacturing of cell phones, to Apple is manufacturing cell phones in India now, to all the back office operations that are technologically enabled, and now increasingly people being employed in this space technology. So when you start growing the entire economy in multiple aspects of it, when you start bringing in these new technologies, eventually it ends up helping all the population. It lifts everyone out of poverty. I remember people at one time marching on the streets in Mumbai saying that they don't want computers in the bank. And today you can go back and say, did computers in the bank lift more people out of poverty, or did it eliminate more jobs? And you can argue that there are now more banks, that banks are employing even more people than before, and they're offering more services to people. The services are reaching more rural areas. The satellite, the money that was spent in space enables better farming, better weather forecast, uh, and more better education in remote areas. So I think to say that you can only do one but not the other, or put all the money in schools but don't put it in space program or nanotechnology or artificial intelligence, I don't think that a country can run that way. And then there's the
Yes.
aspect of defense, right? Unless you are advanced technologically, you will not exist as a country.
Yes. Rahul sir, education and health are the major and essential commodities of the any democratic countries. But in India, education in the hands of the private sector, health in the hands of the private sector, poorest among the poor people not able to get the justice for their problems. Then how you suggest?
So education and health, I think these are really critical
Yeah, I
things.
mean, America is a great example. They
Yeah.
have own system for the education and health. A lot of things are happening within the America. Well, we can take that as a model,
Yeah. So education and health, let me just, talk about these two in an interconnected manner.
please.
In terms of, India's poverty and how, we have somewhat come out of it, but still have a long way to go. I think the fundamental mistake which we made in our country when we started, when we became independent, was that we did not believe in universal primary education. Now, the reason why Nehru, of course, was a person who prioritized, educational institutions of higher learning, IITs, and all that kind of thing, and that did succeed in producing people who, went to America. But at the same time, the masses of our people remained poor, uneducated, and without skills. So, as a result of that, and as a result of the socialistic mindset, we have not been able to develop the kind of manufacturing base. Our education right now needs to concentrate massively on skills which are useful, necessary, and which are required by, by the workplace. And there is a big divergence between what is being taught in educational institutions and what the market demands. Now, as a result of that, educational institutions have fallen, very much in the hands of, private people. But they have succeeded in increasing the skill level of our people. There's no doubt about it. but it is the public education which matters. And that is something which will really have to be sorted out, because government schools are run quite poorly, and they are not producing people, which are required for the market. Now, coming to the second thing of health, if you have a look at the nutritional profile of people in India, literally millions of people are still undernourished, right?
Yeah.
There is stunting in their growth. Their height is not efficient. They're protein deficient, and consequently, with the result, you will see. Of course, in big Indian cities, you've started seeing obese people. But when I go around, the countryside, essentially people are all very thin. And the reason for that is that they're probably not getting enough food. And Indian food, contrary to what we think, may not be that healthy because it's carbohydrate rich. We have a problem of, big problem of diabetes in India. We have a big problem of heart disease in India. So the nutrition really requires to be fixed. As a result of that, our health system, which has to cater to a whole lot of people because of the millions involved. Now, of course, they have got Ayushman Bharat, in which they are giving a certain amount of money to poor people. But the root cause which needs to be fixed out there is, healthier cities, cleaner air, better food, better nutrition, better diet for us to get any hold of it. Because curative medicine in the Western sense is going to be very expensive for us. So these
Yeah.
two are highly interrelated issues in terms of education, which needs to be more oriented towards employment, and health, which needs to be make sure that the bodies and minds of the Indians, especially the young children, are fed nutritionally adequate diets so that their brains and bodies, develop adequately.
Yes. Ajay bhai, Indian developmental path is expecting lot from Indian diaspora NRI community. How you will helpful and what kind of message you will give for the country of
So one thing I would do is not give advice because I don't think that people sitting in
factual fictions?
yeah, I think there are 1.5 billion people in India.
Yes.
They know what they need to do. I think people. It's very generally it's very bad for people who don't live in India to be lecturing people in India how they should be running the country, how they should be managing their affairs and all that. But one thing that people in India should know, that people who came out of Bharat, people who came out of India, have a special place in their heart for India, and they
Yeah.
are willing to do anything they can to help. So I can point to a few things that people outside of India are doing. Rahulji just mentioned primary education. I think one of the things that people have done really well, people at the diaspora has done really well, is to invest in the education, primary education, secondary education, and even higher education, but primarily the primary and secondary education in India. There is a program that, for example, Vishnu Hindu Parishad of America, World Hindu Council of America runs, called Support a Child. This is at every individual child level, and Seva International has a similar program. So at every individual child level, a person sitting in America can actually go and support that kid for a certain $20-25 a month, and that takes care of everything: the nutritional requirement, educational requirement, the residential requirement if they're coming from Vanvasi area, all of that. There is a similar program called Ekal Vidyalay. Ekal
Yes.
Vidyalay is a single room school that have been set up in areas where in today's day and age, it's hard to believe that people would teachers take 8-10 hours to actually reach that school. They're that remote, and they're running a 100,000 such schools, and they're all supported by diaspora. So that is one kind of help that people sitting here can give. The other kind of help that we can give is there are certain special skills. So it's a well-known fact that a lot of people with skills have gone out of India, and if there is an opportunity to donate time and skills in a organized, systematic manner, whether it's in educational institution, as in terms of in governmental bodies, non-profit organizations, anywhere, that kind of skills donation or skills contribution to India is also very helpful. The third one is entrepreneurial. There are a lot of places where the companies, people who are in diaspora have started companies, and this could be really a win-win, because you want to have these companies be global. And what better place to make it global by starting a a branch in India or a subsidiary in India and really work for that. The fourth part I would say is taking the technology that has been developed in Western countries and making it available and modifying it, customizing it for rural area, for rural India. And that will help rural America also. So, for example,
Yeah.
if you have created a small medical device that is a wearable, you can take that wearable device and you can say, how do I adopt this device to rural India's need? That's a really important need. And maybe that is where the technology and the need in rural area developed in Western areas can be applied to rural areas in India. And at the same time, the technologies that are developed in India, there's a classic example of the sachet of shampoo which developed by Procter and Gamble for the Indian market, for the very impoverished market in India. How that became popular in America, where it became a single-use sachet in all the motels, where you have shampoos in small plastic sachets. So those are the kinds of technologies. Some of it will be developed in India. Maybe it will find a way in America for other uses, or maybe in rural America where there's real need for telemedicine and other things. So there's a lot of convergence. But one thing we should refrain from, again, I would say, is give advice, because nobody wants advice, nobody likes advice. What we want to
No, no,
do
no.
is
Whatever the
work,
points you are raising, that's a really valid point.
like really
It's a
work with
required.
people. Yeah, work
Yes.
work in a way that doesn't sound like, okay, we are better than you and we are here to give you advice. Not that way.
Yes. Rahul sir, what is your conclusion remarks? And we have completed Diamond Jubilee celebrations, 75 years. What is your conclusion remarks?
I would say that I'm really happy
You are
that
out
the
of frame again, Rahul ji. Be in frame, please.
yeah
Yeah.
now
Yes.
I would
Yes.
I would say that I'm very happy that the civilizational and the Sanatan genius of India is getting increasingly expressed in our country. I hope that will continue. That is a non-violent philosophy. Sanatan Dharma is based upon both of science and spirituality. It has got potential which the world has not seen. We are always in a position to learn from others and also to rely on our wisdom, our ancient traditions. Our ancient traditions are not immutable. They are not something which cannot adapt to the circumstances. If there's one thing which is there in Sanatan Dharma is that it is something which is always changing and yet never changing to suit the temper of the times. What I would say is that India is approaching a critical time, in its arc of development and as a nation. And I think the next 20 years is going to be really, really, can be promising, but also can be very trying for the country based upon all the civilizational issues which are coming up. And we will have to be, firm and determined, as we go forward to make sure that our country and Sanatan Dharma survives. Remember, this is the only country in the world where Hinduism exists apart from, Nepal. And the reason why it didn't travel to the rest of the world is that we do not believe in conversions, right? Yet at the same time, all religions are not the same. So I look forward to India's future with a mixture of great hope and at the same time, with a hard-headed look as to make sure that we are completely aware of the challenges and we take the necessary steps to counter them ruthlessly if necessary.
Yes, thank you, Rahul ji, as well as Ajay bhai. Many, many thanks for your valuable participation in the remarkable debate. Mana TV always with you, be a voice of the NRIs as well as wherever the problems are there in India or outside India, we are there. And thanks for your valuable suggestions and contributions. We will continue the path, whatever we started, not only on the question of the Diamond Jubilee, on every occasion, Mana TV is with the NRI community. Thanks for participation and thanks for your feedback and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you very
Namaste.
much. Namaste.
Yes.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.